Every single person in this world has a story to share. Your story is your superpower, and it's unique to you. In sharing it with the world, you can impact millions of people. If you keep it to yourself, you are doing the world a disservice. This is Dela. I'm the host of Dela's Voice, and I help you share your superpower with the world.
Hello and welcome to another Dela's Voice Sunday live talk show. Happy 4th of July to all Americans. We just had Canada Day just a few days ago, July 1st. So happy Canada Day to all Canadians. It is once again a blessing for me to have this platform where I come on here every Sunday and share with you some of the world's most incredible stories. Nothing brings me more pleasure than knowing that with this show, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of information, and a whole lot of hope gets added to your life. So thank you for being here every Sunday, and let's have a great show today, as usual. Today, we're talking about bringing more gumption to your life. No one can talk about this better than my friend, Steve Weber. I met Steve a few months ago, and I was blessed to be on his show, American Gumption, where he brings happy stories, positivity, a whole lot of positivity to his viewers, and his impacting the world with every single show. Steve has a long career of entertaining, inspiring people. You're going to see in a moment, and we're going to talk to him. And actually, I just want him to tell his story because no one can tell it better. Steve is himself a broadcaster, a Forrest Gump impersonator for a long time, which he turned into really what he does today. That's where his passion stems from. And we're going to hear all about that and his plans of what he's planning to do with this passion of his. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome my friend, a great man, Steve Weber on Dela's Voice. Hello.
Hi, Dela. Great to see you again.
Good to see you too, Steve. It's good to see you. Welcome on the show. I'm so glad that we got to do this because we've known each other for a few months. You had me on your show, and this never happened until the right time when it was perfect.
Yeah, and it was a few weeks back. You said let's schedule a time, and so I went to your calendar, and the very first day available was July the 4th, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's the holiday. And then I realized there's no better day to talk about American Gumption than on the 4th of July. So
absolutely, so happy 4th of July.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, you guys, Canada, our Canadian friends just celebrated their Independence Day, and now we are celebrating ours. And it's a wacky, crazy world we live in these days. And so this independence concept is stronger today than ever.
It certainly is. How do you feel these days, Steve?
I feel like we're in kind of a bit of a twilight zone in the sense that things that we always just took for granted, suddenly, I'm starting to think, gee, can I no longer take certain things for granted? Am I no longer allowed to say certain things? And I know that this whole last year has been one where our independence and our freedoms that we always just took for granted are now being, people are looking at them differently. So how this all plays out, we are going to see. But, people like you and I who are, showing off people who are living free and making their own choices and living life the way they want to, I think we got to all make sure that we preserve that way of life.
I agree with you. There has been a lot of stuff that we've taken for granted, and certainly I think in the past few months, if one of the things we've all learned is to look at life in with more gratitude attitude, and I'm with you on that. The things that we used to take for granted, we are no longer doing that. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's one of the silver linings of the past few months.
So, I've always kind of just went along, not making, I don't want to say, I sort of tried to plan my life. And yet at the same time, I've just allowed things to happen and unflow the way they do. So, it's a very interesting way of looking at the life. We can either try to control things, or we can either allow things to happen. And that gratitude and that attitude of gratitude is more of allowing, as opposed to trying to force certain things. Because things, I look back on my life, the things that have been the most fun and the most enjoyable weren't things that I necessarily planned, but they were things that suddenly there was an opportunity and I just seized it, and it kind of led to a magical way. And then, one thing leads to another. And we'll talk about a movie that a character just goes through his life and he has these things happen to him that are special all the way through. So
it's so true. I agree with you. A lot of times we try to plan things. We like to control things. And so learning that not everything is in our control that has been one of the biggest lessons of my life, Steve, and it keeps coming up. It's crazy that we're talking about it today, but it's so true that, one of the most important things I learned was the Serenity Prayer. Do you know that prayer, Steve?
I do. Yeah.
And so for viewers that may not know about the Serenity Prayer, and I want to put it out there because it is one of the best thing I ever learned in my life. And you can replace the word God with whatever you like. I would like to use God. So it goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
Steve, how often do we get stuck in that position of, this is in my control, and it absolutely is not in your control?
Yeah. I've been fortunate in that I've had these times when, by just kind of going with the flow, some amazing things happened. And then I also had, really about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I had this period where I tried to force a whole bunch of stuff to happen. And, it was kind of a rabbit hole that wasn't a good place to be. And the harder I tried to force it to happen, the more difficult it became. And, eventually you get, you overcome it and you let go of what you thought was supposed to be, and you just go with what is available. And again, whether you call it God or however you refer to its source, divine wisdom, the quantum world, lots of other God names, it's all good. Everybody gets to choose and decide. The important thing is, do you have that connection? And when you have that connection, that's when the magic can happen, and that's when the good things, allow you. Just it's and for people who are fans of law of attraction, it's the art of allowing. I've been practicing this law of allowing. That's been really high in my vibration the last few years, because so much good is out there, but it's allowing it to come forward.
speaking of allowing it to come forward, let's go back to your story, Steve. I mean, okay, if you're watching this and noticing all the Forrest Gump behind Steve, and you're like, yeah, this guy looks like Forrest Gump. So let's go back and actually tell us your story of how you got started. I mean, how did it happen for you?
Well, it really started in 1982. I had just or 81 or 82, I moved to California from the East Coast, and I was only there for, several months, maybe, not even a full year. And someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, you look like the guy from Bosom Buddies." And I said, "Oh, great. Who's that?" And they said, "I don't know what his name is, but you look like the guy from Bosom Buddies." And then that started happening on a regular basis. And I would always say, "Well, who is this?" I didn't know the show, and people didn't even know his name. Well, you fast forward a few years, and everybody learned who the actor was. And, he had this kind of career that started out with, he was a young guy, just a couple years older than me. And he is making movies that aren't necessarily blockbuster movies. But as time went on, he made quite a few blockbuster movies. And of course, I'm talking about Tom Hanks. And then by the 90s, it wasn't so, the Bosom Buddies was long gone, but people would always ask me, "Hey, has anyone ever said you look like?" And they'd ask me the question, and then they say, "Do you know who you look like?" And Dela, I heard that hundreds of times and probably thousands of times.
Yeah.
And people would then say, like, they'd ask a bunch of different questions, but they'd always ask, "Have you ever thought of making any money off of it?" And the first time or two I heard the question, it the answer was no, I never did think about that. But it had happened so many times where people asked that question that it almost became not a fun conversation to have. And so I would shorten the whole conversation when people would say, "Hey, has anybody ever told you you look like?" And then I'd instantly say, "Yeah, and I'm going to figure out how to make some money off of it." Because it kind of ended the whole conversation. And sometimes, I'd go through the whole thing and let them ask the questions. But, I had done that again, so many, you've had this experience where, you just get tired of talking about the same thing. So I didn't necessarily believe that I was going to make money off of it as much as I was just tired of having, people ask that question. But here's the funny part about it. I had said probably hundreds of times, I'm going to make some money off of it, that when suddenly I was presented with an opportunity to make some money off of it, I, jumped at it. And so that's kind of how it happened. So the movie Forrest Gump came out in July of 1994. So in fact, it's July 6th. So in 2 days, it's going to be the 1994. It's going to be the 27th anniversary of the movie when it came out. So that year for Halloween, I dressed up as Forrest Gump. And it's kind of a funny story because as an adult, a young adult, I enjoyed getting dressed up in different costumes and going and I was somehow braver when I had a costume on.
Of course.
I would be a little more wild than I was in real life. And so I was Forrest Gump for Halloween in 1994. And I put the costume away in the closet and thought, well, that's the end of that. And what happened was about 15 months later, it's March of 1996, and I'm driving around in California. I had a sales job, so I'm going on a sales call, and I hear Bubba saying fried shrimp, barbecued shrimp, coconut shrimp, and it caught my attention, of course, and it was a news story, and they said the Bubba Gump restaurant is going to open in Monterey, California, and they're going to open 17 restaurants across the country in the next few years. And I had this moment, yeah. And I just stopped and I went, am I going to actually do something about this or not? And it was like I had said to hundreds of people, I'm going to go make money off of this. Like it was like a moment of truth where, you kind of have to look in the mirror or face yourself and say, am I going to do what I said I was going to do? Or am I going to not do it and then give up the right to say that line forevermore? And so I knew I needed to call them, and I did, and I arranged an interview. And so within about a week after hearing about the story, I was dressed in the costume again, walking through the restaurant, which still hadn't even opened, but they were practicing and getting ready to open. And they hired me, and I ended up working with them for, the next, 15 years. So
what was that conversation like when you called them? What did you say?
Well, I just left a message with, I ended up, getting the receptionist or somebody who answered the phone and told her who I was. And then I ended up talking to the executive assistant. So the president of the company's, assistant. And I told her what the story was. And I just said, and it was really more me speaking than us having a conversation. I said, you're not going to believe it. I look just like Forrest Gump. I've been told this for the last 15 years. Tom Hanks is exactly 2 years older than me. So we're the same age and, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'd like to come down and meet you guys, and, no obligation. I just want to come in and meet you. And if it works out, great. So I got a call back then from the general manager of the restaurant. And he said, yeah, I heard you look like Forrest Gump. And I was like, yeah. And I said, I want to come down. He goes, sure, come down anytime. And I said, well, when do you want me to come down? And he said, it doesn't matter. We're here every day. We're getting ready to open up the restaurant. And I said, well, how about next Wednesday? And he said, that's fine. And I was like, well, how about 6 o'clock? He goes, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, I hung up the phone and I thought, man, I don't think they're very excited that I'm coming down. And, I had been in sales. So, I know when someone's like excited to, and when someone's just kind of shining you on and, going through the motions. So I go there, and the restaurant was packed because this was just luck. They were practicing, like getting ready to open up the restaurant, but they were practicing with the employees, and they do something called the black and blue, where half the employees are customers or pretending to be customers, and then half are workers. And then the next day they reverse the roles where, the other half works and the other half is a customer. And the idea was that people would experience what it was like to come to the restaurant, whether you were a worker or whether you were a customer. And they wanted to create this experience for the patrons and for the employees. It was like a lively, fun place to be. And then of course Gump showing up, just added to the fun. So when I walked in, Dela, the place kind of exploded with applause, and I went to all the tables and talked to people. And after about a half hour of just doing this and kind of being on my own, like acting like I owned the place, I was like, well, where's the person I'm supposed to meet? And so at that point, I did meet the contact, and, we left the restaurant area and went to another room and had a conversation. And what I did, Dela, was I brought, I had my suitcase. There's the remaining of part of the suitcase up there. It sort of wore out. And although I do have another, a new suitcase that I use.
Were you in that white suit?
I had the white suit on. Yep. I was in costume, and
so were you speaking like Forrest Gump at that point?
Yep. So
you just honed in into this amazing opportunity, and it worked out for you.
Yeah, and I had done if I had to go find the costume during that 1 week time period, it would have been a lot more pressure. But I already had the costume from Halloween a year earlier, and I had been working in sales for, the last, 8 or 9 years. And so I was used to, meeting people, and, I had a couple of sales positions, and really sales is nothing more than acting, right? You learn a new product, and then you go out and you talk to people about the product. So you just showed up, and I just showed up, and I acted like the character. And, but what I did was I brought, when I was talking with the director of marketing, I opened up the suitcase, and I had 3 pieces of paper, and I handed paper number 1, and it said, you could hire me for the grand opening. And, they're looking at it. And then I opened the suitcase and handed paper number 2 and said, you could hire me for the grand openings of the 17 restaurants you're going to open the next couple of years. So I was essentially like, I was, giving them the idea of how they could use my services. And then
brilliant.
The third paper said, you can hire me on the weekends and I'll just sit there and talk to people and, entertain them outside on the bench. Because all the restaurants, and this was only the first restaurant, they always had a bench out front of the restaurant, and it was a way to talk to people. And I did that. I ended up getting hired for all 3 of those. I ended up opening 22 restaurants in the 15 years that I was there. And then I worked most weekends in Monterey or San Francisco, just talking to tourists for, like about a 5-hour period from 12 to 5 on Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. Sometimes, an extra day in the summer months. So it was a kind of a surreal job. I describe it now as like I kind of lived in a fishbowl. I was like, people would walk by and look at me and sit down and take their picture and talk to me. And it was fun. And I developed the routine of how to make it work so that it was not only fun for people, but it was fun for me too, because I learned pretty quickly that, if I'm not having fun, then nobody else is having fun.
No.
And that's the thing that people in the working world sometimes miss. They show up to work and they're not having fun, and then nobody else is having fun working with these people. So how do we find fun in our lives, no matter what our job is? And I had this kind of unique thing that I had to make it be fun. And of course, people would often say to me, "Oh, you're really lucky because you look like somebody." And it was true. I was very lucky and I appreciated it. But it was also, there was a lot of, it wasn't like I just rode that luck along. I put a lot of effort into, perfecting the craft of being the character. And it did become a job at a certain point, where I just had to show up. And once it really kind of got to that point where I knew how to do all of the interacting, kind of on autopilot, right? You train yourself to become, so it's become or it's, it's just, you're just automatically doing it. You're not having to think about it all. Once I got to that point, that's when I really tuned in, Dela, on the idea that how do I have to be when I show up there in order for it to work, in order for it to be magical? And I had to be rested. I had to be nourished. I had to keep myself hydrated throughout the day. I had to be in a good mood the whole time. And there were times when, there were mistakes that I made when I didn't, behave in that kind of a good mood way. And it made interactions awkward. And it wasn't fun for me and it wasn't fun for the people. And fortunately, I was wise enough to, be able to catch myself when those things happened and make adjustments so that, they happened. They became rare and few and far between when that happened, because I just knew I needed to show up ready to go each and every day. And
show up 100%. Isn't that how we have to live life like that? I think you're so right. I want to know, what did you learn about people during that time, Steve? Because you're sitting on a bench and there's these, like, I can imagine hundreds of people passing by and they want to take a picture with you, and some of them actually sit down and they want to get into this and they start talking to you. What did you learn about people?
Well, I always believed that people were good. I had this, like, I lived enough of a nice life early on that, I was always surrounded by, nice people. The family situation and, the schools that I went to early on in my life, not 100%, but, overall, like I lived a good life. And so I always had the belief that everybody was good. So I just welcomed people and enjoyed interacting and meeting them. So that was the first thing that I think is like an important component of why it worked. But people are surprising because they have their own crazy ideas about this whole thing. And people wanted to believe in the magic part of it. They wanted to have fun with it. They saw it. They saw me that, they just embraced it, and they came like kind of running over. And I had to learn to allow them, there's that allow word again, to just be who they were going to be. Because people would like fit into kind of categories, like they would behave in certain ways, but every once in a while there'd be some people who would just sort of be, out of the box. And it was, and initially that was not something that like I knew how to react to. And then I realized that I don't even need to react to it. I can just allow them to be. And so, what was your question? Remind me the question.
I was just wondering, what did you learn about people?
Yeah, I think people are good, and I think they want to do good things, and they want to love. They want to be kind, and the character was the perfect venue and opportunity for them to just be kind and caring. The character was kind and caring and loving, and so it like dropped their guard down, and I got to see them, and I received a lot of what I call unconditional love from people. Now I knew it wasn't like me personally, because they didn't know me, but the character allowed them to kind of open that and let their guard down and just be kind and generous. And I would be kind and generous. I mean, I loved meeting people and I loved interacting with them. And so there was like this like kind of special energy that flowed, back and forth between us. And, since then, of course, I've kind of come to understand that whole energetic thing that happens with people, people who are heart-centered. And so the character kind of allowed us to be in that kind of heart-centeredness. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Did that change you as a person?
I didn't think here. Yes, the answer is yes, it did. The longer answer is that I didn't think it was at the time. And maybe it wasn't at the time. Maybe it was like, kind of this evolution over the years. But I embraced being the character, and I learned what I needed to do to be the character. And the restaurant, to their credit, they didn't give me a lot of coaching. They let me just do what I wanted to do. But there was certain things that they did coach me on, and that was just to stay in character and just to be the character. So I really did learn how to embrace being the character. As I look back on it, I can see that I gave away a bit of myself, and I didn't even know who I was. I was like in my mid 30s, late 30s when the role came upon me, and I was at a point where, you're kind of figuring it out. You're deciding what you think and what you don't, what you believe and who you are. But what happened was I kind of got into a suspended animation for about 15 years when I was this character. And I was trying to evolve who Steve was, but it wasn't until like kind of the last couple of years I had moved to Montana. I was doing the role part-time, and I had begun developing my message to be a speaker, because I had chosen to, carry on using the character in a inspirational type of way, developing an inspirational speaking business, just a speaker, keynote speaker. And so but what I figured out was that I didn't have a message, and I knew how to entertain people, and I knew how to tell stories in a kind of an interesting, entertaining way. But it was like, what was the purpose of it all? That part I hadn't figured out. And so as I was transitioning out of being Forrest Gump and being Steve Weber, the speaker who, uses the character to kind of, deliver this message of gumption, I mean, I really had to examine all of my core beliefs and learn about the self-conscious or the subconscious, and the fact that 95% of the things that we operate are in that subconscious realm, and are not aware of it. So I had to kind of open up that can of worms of what my beliefs were, and excavate almost them all out, and look at them and decide what I believed and what I didn't believe. So the way the character changed me, to answer your original question, was it ultimately forced me as Steve Weber to decide what I believed and what I didn't believe. And it wasn't good enough to just adopt what the beliefs of Forrest Gump might have been. I mean, it was a fictitious character. So everybody gets to interpret what Forrest Gump believed on their own. But what was it that Steve Weber believed? And that was the part that once I opened that can of worms, it took several years to really sort that all out. And it was people who use the term that they awakened, where they became aware that they have been living a life unaware and kind of on autopilot. It allowed me, or forced me, to awaken and go, oh my gosh, there's so much more to life than just going on autopilot. And the 15 years, for the most of the 15 years, I was able to just kind of do it on autopilot once I kind of reprogrammed myself to be that character. And then I kind of had to reprogram myself to not be the character. And it was funny that I think it was a 4th of July party, and I was in Montana, and it really was at the end of my career, like right at that transition point where I was no longer being the character. And I was talking to people, and they were like, go ahead, be the character, go ahead and be the character. And, look at this guy. And I was just dressed as Steve. And I kind of had that moment where I went, I just wanted to be Steve for a change instead of the character. And so there was that couple year period where, I couldn't embrace the character in that kind of loving, fun way, because it was over that part, but the new part, was still to be written. Yeah. And so there was this confusion part. So I don't know if that answers your question of how it
does,
me, but
absolutely does. So we're going to take a short break, Steve,
okay.
And we're going to be right back, and we're going to continue. And then we're going to start talking about your message of gumption. We'll be right back. Thanks. Welcome to Flowers and Things Flower and Gift Shop, serving Newmarket, Ontario and area for over 18 years. Flowers and Things Flower and Gift Shop is here to make your flower sending experience a pleasure. Please visit us online at www.flowersandthingsflowerandgiftshop.com or call us at 905-830-0024. Flowers and Things Flower and Gift Shop. We thrive on your satisfaction. And we're back with Steve Weber of American Gumption. So then you had this whole transformation, and I think it's great how you took that story and you got us to this place of now you are at a place where you're trying to find your message, really, and doing all that work as Forrest Gump led you to that point in time. And I love that you've picked gumption. And I gotta admit to you, until I met you, I had never really thought about the meaning of the word gumption. And so I want to ask you, what does that mean for you?
So it was probably around 2007 or 8, and I had already made the decision that I was going to develop a speaking message. And I was still working for the restaurant, so I didn't really have to, decide. I just was like talking about deciding. And I ended up hiring a coach who was going to help me develop the message. And she was a professional speaker. And I said, I want to talk about personal responsibility, because I thought about it. I thought, no, that makes, that's something that, seems like an important component. And she said, no corporation will pay you to to talk about personal responsibility. You got to talk about sales or marketing or diversity or, one of these, one of these head-based ideas in terms of training people, but an idea, like a heart-based idea, wasn't something that the corporate world would pay for. This was her message and interpretation. So I thought, I'm going to talk about gumption, because that word had been surrounding me for the last 15 years or so, 10 years. And I thought, I'll just redefine gumption to mean personal responsibility. And so I said, gumption means taking responsibility for the way you think, for your thoughts, the way you act, your actions, and the way you interact with others. And then I created names for it. And your thoughts was called mindset, and your actions were called moxie, which is a synonym for gumption, and it means energy. So your actions, if they're energetic, are moxie. And then graciousness was your the way you want to interact with others, being kind and gracious and considerate of other people. So those became, the foundation of what gumption, meant for me. And so I was kind of disguising the personal responsibility in the word gumption. And I later came to realize that that was not very good advice, in the sense that nobody will pay you to talk about personal responsibility, because personal responsibility is so critical in everything we do. And anyone who's moved that 15 inches from the head down to the heart knows that this is where this is the way you can live a heart-centered life. And corporations have been admittedly slow to embrace that, but I think that we're really accelerating into that whole time period right at the moment. So it's a good foundation. I'm not sure what I should another question.
The meaning of the word gumption, your definition of gumption.
Yeah. So gumption meant taking responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and interactions with others. And I developed the whole story around all of it. As time went on, though, I dug deeper into the movie, and I invented the 3 life lessons from the movie. And I initially had about 20 life lessons, but it was too much for people to it was just like life lesson after life lesson after life lesson.
Well, can we hear those? Can we hear those 3?
Absolutely. So the first life lesson is I'm going to get my props out here.
Oh, how fun.
The feather, and the feather comes and lands at the foot of Forrest Gump, and he reaches down and picks it up. And that's the opening scene of the movie. So the feather represents the opportunities that come into our life. And I mentioned previously that the feather for me was the fact that they opened up a Bubba Gump restaurant, right down the road from where I was living in California. And so if they had opened their first restaurant in Florida or in Boston, it would have never happened. So but the feather was there. And when I heard that news story, and I said, oh my gosh, am I going to call these people? It was really a question of, am I going to reach down and pick up the feather that just landed at my foot? And the thing about feathers, about opportunities, is they don't land right in your hand, and they don't even land on your lap. They land like somewhere where you can see them, but
you kind of need to grab them.
You got to catch them, right? You got to reach up and catch them. And so that's life lesson number 1. How's that sound?
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I love that analogy. I love it. Yes.
So then number 2 is the chocolate box, right? Life is like a box of chocolates. The most famous line from the movie. Life's like a box of chocolates. Can you say it like Forrest Gump? My mama always said, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
So tell us the meaning of that for you.
So right at the beginning that I started doing this, I said, that doesn't make sense. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. I said, that's a victim mentality. And so I remember I had a coach who was helping me with my initial writing. And she said, that's the most famous line from the movie. You can't change the meaning of that. And I said, and I kind of agreed with her just because, we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Right. And so I went, oh, well, okay. And so I stuck with that, and I still use that line. But what I kind of put a little twist on it, life is like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever chocolate you want, or you get to choose whatever life you want. And now we've taken what was actually a pretty good line for a movie and a pretty good line for a mother to tell a 5-year-old boy who doesn't have, the same understanding. Life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, from that perspective, Mama Gump was correct. And because she was teaching Forrest that, hey, life's like a box of chocolates. There's no bad chocolates. You're going to get one.
It's all sweet.
They're all sweet. Some are going to be your favorites and some of them aren't going to be your favorites, but it's not like they're poison or they're bad for you. Well, they may not be good for you, but they're all taste good. So it's a way of looking at life, and taking whatever chocolate you get, whether you get your favorite one or you don't get your favorite one, there's a surprise element to it. It's that control that we talked about. You don't get to control every outcome along the way. But I do feel like it's important to say life's like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever chocolate you want because we're all adults here now. We're big people. We get to pick whatever one we want. And with practice, we know what's inside of different chocolates, right? We have the ability to learn. Dela, have you ever looked at a chocolate box and went, oh, that one has nuts in it. That one's a cream. That one has a caramel in it. Yeah. You can just kind of tell maybe it's oozing out the side a little bit. And so, we learn about it. We don't know. We're not 100% sure, but, we get to pick whatever one we want. And that's the way life works. We get to pick whatever life we want through our thoughts, through our actions and through our interactions with others. And that positive mindset, that positivity that we talked about at the beginning is so important.
And I feel like personal responsibility has a big role there too.
Absolutely.
Right. So you pick something and I'm, personal responsibility says, well, that I picked that. So I chose that and I'm going to live it and I'm going to learn my lesson. And then the next time I'll choose something else. Right.
So even if it's not the favorite chocolate, it's like a learning lesson. And it wasn't that bad, So do you look at when things happen to you? Do you may not be happy with something that happens because it wasn't what you were hoping for or wanting. But if you're going to talk about that, if you go and speak that every day for the next week, and then every day for the next month, and then every day for the next year, you just are perpetuating that kind of, that vibration of like what you don't want. And that's really the law of attraction then, where, what we think about and what we focus on is what we end up attracting back into our life. And so letting go of these things, living in that present moment, not being caught up in the what had happened kind of thing, but rather, where are we going kind of thing and what's happening right now in this moment. And that's really what was brilliant about the character Forrest Gump was he lived in the moment. Now he was, he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And, so people might say, well, he didn't know any better, but he maybe it's better that we don't know better. And we just live in the moment and we just take things as they come and we, interpret them in a way that, is to our benefit and to our, our learning and our option that way. So Forrest really did live his life in the moment, which is probably the most important thing I've learned, since then. When my career as Forrest Gump ended, I was very future oriented in the sense that, when this happens, when I achieve this, then I'll be happy. So that was kind of a future. And then you still had like a lot of like, well, this happened or that happened, victim mentality. Yeah. So living in the moment, being grateful. You talked about the gratitude attitude, living gratefully and appreciating what comes at us day in and day out is really so important. And I'll just say that the last third lesson, because I didn't really say it.
Oh, that's right. You didn't say the last.
It was the shoe, and it's the journey of life, and it's the life chapters that we go through. And Forrest, the whole movie is nothing more than the journey of life for Forrest. So he just goes from being a boy to being in high school to being a football player to going in the army to being a shrimp boat captain, you know. And so it's just, and that's what our lives are all about. It's just that journey. So what had happened, Dela, was I was really like this character, and then I decided I was going to create this message, and I did create the message, and Speaking Gump, which is my original website, and it's still alive, speakinggump.com, and it has all the 500 blog posts where I wrote about the these life lessons and personal responsibility and all that. I got to the like 2018 timeframe, and I was getting antsy in the sense that I felt like it was time to go. I had been living in Montana for about 10 years, and I suddenly felt like, I needed to go back out into the world. And I probably, as I retrospectively look at it, I needed Montana to kind of take the time to sort out what my own core beliefs were, stop living that kind of fishbowl life that I lived for 15 years and be ready to do something next. And I thought it was Speaking Gump all along, but I got the idea that American Gumption was my next purpose in life. And what it is I was listening to the news one day, and I realized that there's so much negativity. There's so much fear-based reporting. This group doesn't like this group. And I went, oh my gosh, where are the happy stories? And of course, people were building YouTube channels at the time. And I thought, I'm going to just travel around the country, kind of a la Forrest Gump, but not running in an RV. And I'm going to interview people, and I'm going to tell happy stories. And so that became kind of the mission. And so 2 years ago, I launched kind of just a page, a landing page of American Gumption. And then 1 year ago, I launched the American Gumption website. And 11 months ago, I launched the American Gumption show. And it's a virtual show. Obviously, last year wasn't a good time to be traveling around. And I expect that I'll be traveling around here maybe by the end of this year. I don't have an exact time frame on that yet, but that's going to happen. So in the meantime, I just started doing this daily show where I'm interviewing people, and it's all happening virtually. And but the idea is that many of the people that I meet and interview this way, I will eventually be out on the road, and I'll come to Canada, and we'll have a interview face to face or next to each other in the RV studio. The idea is that the RV will have a studio, and it'll be a broadcast thing, and we'll just meet people and talk and tell the stories of Gumption. And it really is about ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And it's that ordinary, extraordinary. We all are ordinary, and yet we all are extraordinary, and giving people permission to share their extraordinary story is I think it's something that ordinary people take inspiration from and need more of, because the news is poisonous. It's poison. I gave up TV a couple years ago, and you can't help but hear what's going on, but you don't allow that to be like your main energy source of information coming in, because it's fear-based and it's poisonous. So American Gumption is a remedy and an antidote to that type of attitude and living. And so I encourage everybody to sign up for my newsletter on AmericanGumption.com. I do a daily, not quite a daily, but I do a regular broadcast multiple days per week, 3, 4, 5 days, depending. And then, I do a weekly write up about them and links to the past shows and upcoming shows. And it's just, it's evolving. We're going out there, and we're going to make a difference.
It's going to be great. And this idea of, going on the road and doing the show from an RV, I think it sounds great. And there's so many people out there who have extraordinary stories. Yeah. Steve, I'm a total believer in that sharing our stories are so powerful in helping each other. And we all benefit from sharing stories. And so what have you learned from interviewing all these people all this time? You've done, I don't know, hundreds of shows. You've spoken to hundreds of people. What are some things that have been aha moments for you?
I think it's probably the same thing I learned from sitting on the bench, is that people are good and people want good things to happen for themselves, for their families, and for others. And there is there is an energy of the way our world is presently constructed that keeps people from realizing how extraordinary they really are, and that energy is not the truth of what's happening. And we're in this time period where things are kind of breaking down and evolving. And there was a long time period where people felt like nothing's going to change. And the energy I'm feeling is that, things are going to change, but we all have to change, ourselves. And so that awakening is occurring right now, and it's an exciting time. So I think the main thing I learned from interviewing people is that there is optimism out there, and there's really an intolerance for the old way that perpetuated itself for the last 30, 40, 50, 100, couple 100,000, 2,000 years. So it's things are changing. It's a good time.
It's a good time, and I think what we surround ourselves with is super important. So that's why watching shows like this and your show and so many other people who have these amazing great shows with awesome messages, it's so important to really support these shows and get them out there and share them with other people, so that we can, you're right, the change starts with us. So if we want to see the change outside of us, we need to start within. I want to ask you, how do you see success? What is that? What is success to you? If you could give us your own definition.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dela. It's evolved. This is something that's changed. Mm-hmm. My idea of success had been what I'm going to call what we traditionally, call success, meaning, you go, you get educated, you have a job, you have cars, a house, blah, 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 this and that. And now I decide, I define success as living the life that you want to live, and being heart-centered in the sense that, your purpose isn't so much about yourself, but rather your community and the people that you surround yourself with. And so if we can, a successful life is the person who has the option to surround himself with kind, loving, caring people who are making a difference in the world. And so that's what I'm striving for. The initial idea of what success means, I think, is somebody else's idea of it. Yes. So we adopt their idea of success, and then that's kind of the rub. That's the part that's hard to, because even if we achieve that, we're not necessarily happy.
Yeah. You're so right. So when I think of the word gumption, living your life with gumption to me means living your life with passion and energy and gusto and love, and so that's what that means to me. And that's what you're doing. You're living your life with gumption. I think it's great. And so if I were to ask you, what do you envision for the future of Steve Weber?
Well, I think that I'm going to end up spending the next, 5 to 10 years living a bit of a nomadic life, in the sense that I'll be traveling around, meeting different people, and and interviewing. I'm basically doing what I've been doing the last year, but in a mobile fashion, and again, some kind of like a studio in the RV that people will come into, or maybe we'll find a park bench, and we'll sit on the bench, and we'll bring some the equipment over and do it. So a combination of both of those ways of communicating, and maybe interviewing some people virtually, because it's more than just American gumption. It's really global gumption. Freedom isn't only for people living on North America or in the United States. Freedom is a worldwide thing, and there are good people all over the world. And I've met so many people worldwide. People are no different. Culturally, they're different. The languages are different, but in their hearts, they're the same. We're all the same, and we are all connected, and there are no coincidences. And this idea of connectedness is really an important thing to embrace. And if you understand that we're not just these individuals, but we're all connected through the divine, then life becomes much more meaningful and purposeful.
That's so good. Such a good message. I love that despite our differences on the outside, and our culture and geography, and, where we come from and what languages we speak and what we eat, we all have basic emotions that connect us. When we find that, as we get rid of the fear of the unknown, and that's the only way. That's why everybody says, love is the only way. Love, truly, love is the only way. If we can learn to love one another for the human beings that we are, this world would be a much better place. And I think it all starts with us.
It all starts with us, yeah. And the character was kind and loving. And so, using that part and that message of the character to go forward is, just a good way to break the ice with people. But then ultimately, it comes down to how do you interact? How do you behave individually? And, what do you want and desire in life? So life is like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever life you want. Life is like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever life you want. So choose a good one. Choose a good one.
Choose a good one. Thank you, Steve. It was awesome having you on today. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your energy and your experience and all the life lessons. And I want to thank you so much for everything you do, Steve, because you are making this place a better place to live for everyone. So may you continue living your life with gumption, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Dela. It's been great to visit with you and your audience. And, it's a great day. It's a freedom day for the United States, but it's a freedom day for all of the world. We all need to live free, and, we all need to live with gumption. So,
I can't wait to hear from you more as you get on the road. Hopefully you'll make your way up to Canada, and one day we'll get a chance to meet in your RV. So people, keep an eye out for this guy right here, as one day in your travels, you may see a bench somewhere with lots of crew, and Steve sitting on the bench is waiting for you to have a conversation. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Dela.
Best of luck to you. And for everyone who's watching this show, you can find Steve on social media, on Facebook, under Steve Weber. His show is called The American Gumption, and it's a great show. Watch it, please. What's the best way to contact you, Steve?
Yeah, just go to the American Gumption page, and there's contact information or ways to get me a message, and just reach out, say hello.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for watching this show. Please share this if you found it helpful to you. Let this message of inspiration spread, because that's what we need to spread, really. The message of inspiration and hope and love to make this a better world. So thank you, everyone. enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Once again, happy 4th of July to all Americans. And until next Sunday, this has been another Dela's Voice, sparking your soul. Till next time, Steve. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.